Okay, how many of you want to start a company? That's amazing. I've never been in a room with so many people who want to start a company. I'll tell you a bit about myself. I'm an entrepreneur. I started several companies, including companies in my house. The latest one is, and I'm starting another company in my house right now, while I'm starting a company inside a larger, I would say, public company. So that's another experience by itself. I sold a company in Silicon Valley right when the time was right, January of 2000, right before nothing was worth anything. And 2 years later, I bought a company for about $150 million for Texas Instruments. But what I want to give you is, I want to give you a window into how I think about businesses that I start, and how I think about businesses that I invest in. Chuck McCoy is not here yet, but Chuck once called me. Chuck is the executive director of the North Texas Angel Network. He called me one day and he said, we want to start a new angel investor network. And I asked him, who's we? And he said, well, you and I. And so then he brought Mike, and between Mike, myself, we were the first 2 members of the North Texas Angel Network. Now we have more than 60 members. I'm an evaluator and a board member of the North Texas Regional Center for Innovation and Commercialization. So I'm involved with startups, and I have invested in startups. I started startups. And in general, in a year, I see about 500 to 600 business plans. And I want to tell you, with 500, 600, you can imagine that if you go deep into every business plan, you can't do 500, 600 a year. So you need to develop kind of a snap judgment of how do you know if this is a good business or bad. I want to give you how I think. Now, this doesn't mean that everybody thinks the same way, but I want to show you how I think of businesses. And I have to admit that some of my views are somewhat contrarian. They're not necessarily the way that everybody thinks. First of all, a question. How many of you came up with a very cool technology to hear the statement, this is a great solution looking for a problem? You heard that before? You got a great solution looking for a problem. And obviously you're doing something wrong, right? Because what's the right approach? The right approach is let's find a problem and solve it, right? No, wrong. The right approach is find a very cool technology and find a problem that it would solve. That's how I look at things. Find a very cool technology, but find the problem that it would solve. And obviously, when you think about problems and solutions, there is the chicken and egg, right? What comes first? Is it the problem or is it the solution? So when we think about, come up with a problem, identify a problem, then find the solution that would solve it, I want to give you 2 stories, okay? The first one, very short. The first one really is, I don't know if you ever heard of something, well, that clicker doesn't work anymore. You broke it, where is it? There was a technology that was invented, believe it or not, in the 80s by a company called Corning, and it's called the Gorilla Glass. And that was a glass that can't be scratched, and nobody cared. It was a solution looking for a problem. Then came the cell phone market, and cell phones fall. That's one of their features. They fall and they break and they scratch. You touch them, they scratch. They're not resistant free. And all of a sudden somebody found that 1980s technology out of Corning and put 2 and 2 together and did a scratch-free glass for the iPhone, which was the first phone to actually have a touch screen. Another one that's closer to my heart, a technology that I'm really very invested in, is computer vision. It's the ability of computers to see and understand what they see and act on it. And that was a great, back when I joined Interface, the current company that where I'm the Executive Vice President of Strategy, back in December of 2009, I identified computer vision, or specifically embedded computer vision, as the technology that I'm really, really excited about. But what I had was, I had a solution looking for a problem. And instead of dropping it and saying, okay, let's find a problem, forget technology, let's find a problem, I started asking a different question. That is, what kind of problems can computer vision solve? And I started looking at all kinds of problems, and nothing was intuitive. Nothing just made sense. And all of a sudden, I didn't even know what interactive whiteboards are. And I came across this interesting market of interactive whiteboards, where interactive whiteboards are those huge boards that you touch and, you know, they kind of move the cursor, or you can write on them. And I asked myself, how can you solve the problems? Because they have a lot of problems. They have latency problems, they are very expensive, they are heavy, you can't move them, they're not accurate. How do you solve that problem? And I took embedded computer vision and I found how you can solve it. And you can solve it with a very simple way. With a product that I call PenView. Since then I filed 8 patents. And this is a startup within a public company, a 38-year-old public company. I brought a camera to this pen, and this camera has visibility of the board from anywhere in the room, even touching the board. I want to talk about the 4 rules. I promised you 4 rules, and throughout those 4 rules, I'm kind of going to tell you a bit about the story of PenView and how I assess PenView, but this is how I assess everything. Rule number 1, do something different, technically different. Whenever I see, and even this morning there was a session for the North Texas Regional Center for Innovation and Commercialization, it's a mouthful, NTXRCIC, still a mouthful, we're working on the name. But that's the organization that gives out the Texas Emerging Technologies funding, as well as now putting startups in front of investors. And I sat through 6 or 7 presentations in the morning. Again, very quickly you need to decide whether this has any value or not. And the first question that I ask is, how are you doing something different? And I don't care about the value right now. I care about how are you doing it technically different. When I hear it's just about the same as something else, but our take on it is a little different, I don't care. It has to be different. Now, technically different, what does it mean? So when I take the interactive whiteboards and just, you know, put some technical explanation, you got big touch-sensitive screen, there are all kinds of infrared add-ons that can see a pen with a tip that has an infrared tip on it. And then there is PenView, which is the product I showed you, that has a camera on the pen itself. Okay? That's technically different. We're the only company that put the camera on the pen itself. But that still means nothing, right? The second question that you have to ask yourself, and that's the second rule, is, I like to call it the SWWC, so what, who cares rule. Who cares about that? And the first thing that I do is I take a technical difference and I convert it into value. What is the value of that technical difference? And the one thing that I want to break is the 10x myth. Have you heard of the 10x myth? Everything has to be 10x better, right? If it's not 10x better, then it's not differentiated. Well, there are cases where something can be 10x better and only leads to 10% performance improvement, 10% that the customers really care about. Example, the voice quality of a telephone. What if the voice quality of a telephone was, we just came up with a company here that would deliver 10 times better voice quality? Who cares, right? Would people pay more than 10% more for 10 times better voice quality? No, they won't. It's good enough. But at the same time, 10% improvement can lead to 10x value. And specifically what I like to call is cross a barrier. The important part is, how do you cross a barrier? And my favorite example of crossing a barrier is leaving the Earth's gravity. When you shoot a missile or a rocket and you try and leave Earth's gravity, it's the last 10% of fuel that you carry that would actually allow you to leave Earth's gravity. 90% of the fuel would get you nowhere but orbit. The last 10% would let you leave gravity. So 10% can break a barrier and be more important than 10x voice quality on a phone. The next part the next thing that I do is I start converting that value, the technical difference, into the value, as I said before actually. So I'm still on rule number 2. The pen, our pen, can see the screen. which means that it can actually work from anywhere around the room, because our pen can see the screen. The targets are embedded invisibly into the video stream. There's this little box here that VGA goes through. It embeds the targets. In fact, as you look at the screen right now, there are about 2,000 targets embedded there. You can't see them, the pen can. That's a technical difference. Who cares? Well, the value is that this product is very, very accurate because it looks at the screen itself and it knows where it is based on the screen itself. I'm not going to go through too much detail, but I want to go to the next step, and that is once we have defined what the value is. So when I look at the company and I said, okay, I found the technical difference, I can see the value of it, the next question is, who cares about it? And the who cares, I'm just taking a few of them. I looked at two markets, the education market, the enterprise market, and I drew all the different values that we bring. It can work from distance and close. We already identified that. It is portable, as an example. This thing is really portable. An interactive whiteboard is not. Who cares? Well, the portability, for example, for the education market is a bad thing, so that's why it's red. It's a bad thing because a portable device means that it can disappear. For the enterprise market, portability means that you can take it with you and give customer presentation at their location. So sometimes you got values that one market segment would consider a positive, another would consider a negative. But once you do that translation, now you look at this and you go, so which market should I go after first? The ones that are neither green nor red, nobody cares about, really, not a big deal. The ones that are green, people care about them, and they're positive. The ones that are red, people care about them, and they're negative. So when you look at this, you ask yourself, who cares? Who should I go after? Which market should I go after? It's not a rhetorical question. Kind of self-explanatory, but not rhetorical. Education, go after education. So whenever I have an enterprise opportunity, I put it away. Don't care right now. This is the first segment to address. I'll summarize it all for you. By the way, the cost, we drove this from $5,000 to about $500. That's a 10x by itself. Third rule. Third rule is why me and not them? Why me and not them? What makes me special and what prevents all of you here in this room from copying what I did? Well, I'm going to tell you a few of those items, but I'm going to break a few myths in the process. Patents. Patents are important. Where's the lawyer? Okay, that's one. Patents are important, right? There are different opinions on whether you want to have something as a patent or a trade secret, whether you enjoy the fact that the patent is still pending and nobody can really contest it, versus a patent that's already issued and therefore can be contested. But patents is one. Man years. I apologize, that's the phrase, woman year, person year, they're called man years. So, how many man years have we invested in this? And one of the companies that I evaluated, I looked at them and we asked them the very simple question, why you and not them and not anybody else? And they said, we have a lot of man years into this, and this is not something that two guys in a garage, that's their words, I didn't say guys, two guys in a garage can't do in a year. And so we asked them, so how long did it take you and how many people did you have? Well, it's the three of us, and it took us almost a year and a half. Okay, so it's not two guys in a garage, it's three guys in a garage for a year and a half, and they can still, your competitor can still come up with this. So be careful with man years. Then first mover advantage, right? We're the first to market. Bull. Unless you developed a new vacuum cleaner, there is no first mover advantage. In markets where technology moves fast and where markets develop fast, there is no first mover advantage. Your competitor following your heels would get into that market. Don't use that as an advantage. Price. I heard that so many times, unbelievable. Price. We are going to do that in better price. The first question I ask is why? Why can you do that for a better price? And I realize that that's more kind of a hardware type question. Why can you do that for a better price? The only correct answer to this, and there is a correct and incorrect answer to that. The only correct answer is because I have a structural cost advantage that nobody else can get. We're talking about drilling oil, and the only oil field in the world is right under my property. Nobody else in the world can get to my oil field, and there is no other oil field. That's a structural cost advantage. Unless you have something like this that shows why you're the only person in the world who has this advantage, you do not have a price advantage. Your competitor can lower the price as well. I guess we don't care about the right one anymore. Think about other sources, but really think about that question, because that's an important question. That's the third question. That's the third rule. Why me and not them? But I want to touch on two other things. Once you have identified the why me and not them, the next thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you're on a vector. If you decided that your advantage is user experience, you came up with a very unique user experience, you will be known as the company that has the best user experience. You want to stay on that vector. That is Apple's vector, best user experience. Not just user interface, user experience. Walmart, did anybody here attend the opening of the Walmart store in Plano a few years ago when this was going to be the high-end store? You remember that? With all the Maseratis from Willow Bend parked out there and Bentleys and stuff. This was going to be a high-end Walmart. Walmart is not a high-end store. Walmart sells cheap. And they didn't succeed. You know, it ended up just being another Walmart store, not anything else. So don't try and be who you're not. Figure out what is it that made you special. Keep on going on that vector. Finally, make sure that you're sustainable. Make sure that that competitive advantage is sustainable. And staying on a vector is one, but you always have to ask yourself, what do I need to make sure to, what do I need to continue and do to make sure that my competitors can't do the same thing? That leads to rule number 4, WIIFM, what's in it for me? But when I ask what's in it for me, there are actually 3 people or 3 entities that I care about. And the leading term here is ROI. What's ROI? Return on investment, yes. The first and most important return on investment is the customer, not me. The customer. The customer is currently doing something that I'm going to replace or displace, no matter how you look at it. The customer was using horses, they're going to be using cars. The customer is using regular electricity, you want to shift the customer to solar energy. What do? You go to the Department of Energy and you ask for $600 million. Or you actually do an ROI, a customer ROI, and realize that here in Texas, if you want to install solar panel, the return on investment is going to take about 14 years. What is the probability that in the next 14 years, after we install solar panels on our roof, we're going to have a hailstorm that's going to beat the whatever out of those panels? Pretty high. So there's never a customer return on investment on putting solar panels in Texas. Or in Tornado Alley, for that matter. Think about customer ROI. If this does not make sense to the customer, there is no business. Second one you care about is you're building a company. It's not just me, it's our company. The investment that we have put in our company needs to be returned. DSL infrastructure never had return on investment. It was a write-off. Billions of dollars went into DSL infrastructure. They were written off. And on top of that, services started to get offered. But DSL was a failure. There was no return on investment for the companies who invested in it. Finally, investor return on investment. And that's really important because at some point you're going to ask for an investment. And you're going to come to me or someone like me and you're going to ask for $100,000, for $500,000, $1 million, $5 million, or as much as you need. And at that point, I'm sorry, but I'm putting the $100,000 in your company because I want to get $150,000 back. $150,000 back, 15x. That's what I'm putting money. You need to show me why you think I'm going to get $15 for every dollar that I put today. There's a long table that shows over what period of time and so on and so forth, but you need to show me how I get $15 for every dollar that I put today, and that's as important as the customer getting return on investment by using your product or service, and for the company that you're building to get a return on the investment, the overall investment invested in it. I told you what I'm going to tell you, I told you, now I'm going to tell you what I told you. So in summary, 4 rules. Rule number 1, do something technically different. Yes, find the solution first, look for a problem to solve with it. That's the way I look at things. I never try and solve a problem, because if you are too embedded in the world of the problem, you fail to see the alternatives. You fail to see how to solve it with other technologies. So I always like starting with the technology and then finding the what it solves. Who cares? Who cares about it? Translate the technical difference into a value proposition. Find who cares about the value. Remember that 10x improvement may be worth not more than 10%, and 10% improvement may be a barrier crosser. Why me and not them? What is it that I make here that prevents somebody else from following me? What is the sustainable competitive advantage? Forget first mover. It's not first mover. It's not many years. It has to be more than that. What's in it for me? Customer return on investment. It has to make sense for the customer, the user. 1. 2, company return on investment. And finally, return on investment for those who are going to invest. And I lied, it's not 4 rules, it's 5 rules. The last one is be pragmatic. You have to be pragmatic, and that's one of the hardest things when you start a company, because you're already in love with your idea. And the question is, how pragmatic are you in how people are going to use it, how the company will develop, how the market will develop, how the competitors will react, and so on. Okay? With that, I hope you have a great weekend this weekend. We have time for questions?
2 questions.
2 questions. Yes, sir.
What was your first company? How did you get started? This is a big question, right?
I'm sorry?
What was your first company? How did you start?
What was my first company? It was called Yoram Electronics. It started in Israel in 1995. It was developing a product that was in the voice over IP field. And what it did was internet telephony only started. And we hooked up this little device between the computer and the telephone lines that allowed you to just pick up your phone, dial an international phone call, dial an international number, and actually place it over the local telephone line. That was the first one. How did it start? It's an interesting question. How did I start that company? It started when I had salad for dinner, and the salad had onion in it. Onion doesn't sit well with me at dinner, so I didn't sleep that night, and at about 1:30 I realized, you know what? Internet telephony, box, telephones, I can connect them together. Thanks for the question. I'm not kidding, that's this. Yes, sir.
So, my name is Ali, and my question is, if you're an idea person, you have lots of ideas, which one would you pick and work on?
That's an excellent question. If I'm an idea person, I have lots of ideas, which one do I pick up? I want to answer with a short story. When I worked for Texas Instruments, I was in charge of a lot of the innovation and the standardization, industry relations. And in one of my trips to Israel, I met a person at TI. And he told me an interesting thing. He said, you know, I submitted a lot of ideas to management. And they just keep shooting them down. I said, okay, so what do you do about that? I said, what do you mean? I can't do anything. Once management shoots it down, you know, what can you do? And I said, you know, I know why your ideas failed. I said, really? I said, I know who's responsible. He said, who? He's waiting for me to tell him somebody in management. I said, you're responsible, it's your fault. He goes, how so? I mean, I'm the one coming up with the ideas. I said, because you were not passionate enough about any idea to do something about it. When management says no, you know, sometimes I said in Texas Instruments and other companies that management said no, and I kind of selectively ignored it, and I just kept on doing it anyway. You know in your heart which one of your ideas is the best one. Follow that one. That's my answer. I think we're done. So thank you. Enjoy this week.